Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers at VMware, and I'm joined today by Bassam. Welcome, Bassam. This is your first time on Feature Fridays, isn't it?
Yes, correct. Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being on today. Bassam, do you want to just tell people a little bit about yourself, your role in VMware, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Bassam Scala. I'm a staff cloud networking team with VMware. I've been with VMware for a bit more than 4 years now. Um, as a VMware employee, but I've been working with VMware technologies since 2008. My background is networking. I've been doing networking for most of my career, and that's why I'm focusing at the moment with VMware on the cloud and cloud networking stack. And I'm also a V expert. I spoke at Explore last year. I met you, Guy. When I met you, I told you I'm a big fan of Feature Friday episodes. And so thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be presenting in this successful stream.
Well, I tell you what, these episodes are only as successful as the presenters on them. I just get to ask the stupid questions, which is the easy bit. All right, so today we're going to talk about Cloud Director, the new CSE 4.0, TKG, how it all kind of ties together. Obviously, we've got providers out there who have got slightly older versions of VCD, so maybe not 10.4.1. And we'll really want to. I mean, CSE 4.0 it's a bit of a game changer, isn't it? It's suddenly become all it promised it would be in the beginning, don't you think?
Yeah, that's right. And it's not really an upgrade for or for CSE 3.x. It's still a different solution.
Yeah,
It's still a different way of doing things.
Okay, cool. Well, let's dive into it, Sam. Let's
sure.
start with some slides.
So basically, just a quick thing. All the contents I'm going to talk about here is already on my blog, so you can feel free if you want to see the step by step of setting up the whole setup. So this is a quick agenda. So I'll talk about a bit of a CSE container service extension overview, the integration with VCD from architecture point of view, and then we'll talk about the requirements, networking requirements for CSE, which is basically NSXT and AVI, or the NSX Advanced Load Balance. It's a must. And then a demo. So the container service extension, we've got actually, this is the extension that you can add to a plugin, that you add within Cloud Director to be able to offer Tanzu or Kubernetes clusters in general to your tenants, where you can have or offer our Tanzu offerings, the Tanzu Kubernetes services, or native Kubernetes as well. So both are supported, at least in CSE 3.x. You can offer both flavors. In CSE 4.0 at the moment, it's TKG. So this is one of the main differences. So as a provider, you'll have to have some workflow to do in setting up your CSE properly, and then also as a customer or as a tenant, you will also have to do your part, which is basically utilize or use the front end extension or the services offered by CSEs in order to provision your own Tanzu clusters. So the components of the CSE, of the container service extension, you've got a CSE server component, which basically handles all the communications with the Cloud Director via APIs. And then you've got the CSE CLI plugin. And here I'm mainly talking about the CSE 3.x, which is, you have kind of similarities between 3.x and 4, but it's not exactly the same. So the CSE server component, it's for both of them. But in CSE 3.x, you had to install the server component on a Linux VM, which is not the case in 4.x or 4.0, as we're going to see. Also, we don't have a CLI plugin component anymore in 4.x, but this is in 3.x, which was the case. So you had to have a CLI plugin installed on an external Linux VM to be able to interact with the CSI server and upload your templates, so configuring the publishing the needed rules and so on. And then, of course, you had the CSI user interface component, which basically the tenants will use the user interface to be able to roll out their Tanzu clusters and interact and lifecycle management those clusters. So this is generic CSE components. As I said, it's more towards CSE 3.x. So this is how, in general, how 3.x server management looks like. So you had to have a Linux-based VM where you install the server component in it, and in addition to the server component, you had to have a CLI plugin, as I said, to interact with the server component and the VCD. And this is, of course, will be added as a part of the VCD command line interface part of the whole thing. Again, this is for CSE 3.x, and it's not applicable for 4.0. Why I'm talking about 3.x actually, while the focus will be on 4.0, is just to show you the difference in how in what we brought in 4.0. It's totally way easier to use and utilize 4.0 compared to the 3.x. And as I said, at the moment, it's a coexistence model. So it's not that customers who have 3.x will upgrade to 4.0. It's coexistence, because if you want to offer native Kubernetes templates, you'll have to use the 3.x at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, this is just some of the screenshots of the workflow, of the provider workflow. That the provider needed to go through with the CSE 3.x to be able to offer Tanzu as a service for your end tenants.
Yeah, there's a lot of command lines there. I can see
Correct.
there'd be a lot of challenges
Correct.
and things going wrong.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually it was very, very challenging and time consuming to get things up and right with CSE 3.x. And this is really a major game changer, what we brought in 4.0. It's really way easier. You don't need to install any external RabbitMQ or MQTT for messaging services. It is all kind of integrated, very simple to deploy. Everything is automated compared to the 3.x workflow, at least, well, mainly from the provider point of view. For the tenant workflow, it's just more or less the same.
Okay.
So for the CSE 4.0, you don't have to install the server component and the CLI apart from the actual on a separate management Linux VM, for example. No, it's now all within the OVA that you download. So CSE 4.0 is offered as an OVA, a Photon OS, which has got all the binaries, everything that's needed. All what you need to do is just deploy it as inside a VApp. So you create, and we'll see this in the demo lab, you create just a tenant for your CSE. We create a VApp, you roll out the VApp template from the OVA, and then it will get integrated with your Cloud Director. And that actually takes care of all the hassle of setting up the server component and the CLIs. So you don't really need to go through any of these, and you don't use VCD CLI at all with the CSE 4.0.
So do you have to, sorry, just to make sure I understood that correctly, do you have to then deploy an instance of CSE OVA for every single tenant that wants to use CSE?
No,
right, okay.
no. So CSE doesn't integrate with tenants, VCDs, or interact actually with them. It just needs access to the Cloud Director API. That's all.
Yeah.
So it's a user interface plugin and uses the CAP VCD, the cluster APIs for VCD as an orchestration layer. And then you've got the CPI, which is basically to be able to create load balancer. It interacts with Avi. So Avi here is a must. You must have an Avi deployed or NSX advanced load balancer to offer a layer 4 load balancing for your deployed clusters. Basically, your cluster API address for your Tanzu. So you have to have Avi here, and Avi needs to be integrated with your NSX instance, which you are using with your Cloud Director. And this is actually part of the complexity. So the complexity is not really in CSE 4.0, but just a bit to understand the architecture of how the underlying components as NSX and Avi needs to be configured together to be able to be utilized by CSE in rolling out Tanzu clusters.
So here's a question for you, Bassam. I mean, lots of providers have got NSXT now, in which case, may be using Avi today, or they may be looking at Avi, which this is going to kind of mandate that they look at Avi.
Correct.
What about if they're using NSXV still?
With NSXV at the moment, I'm not sure actually that you can utilize CSE 4.0. This I'll have to look into. But with 4.0, it's all the workflow, all the configuration. The reference architecture is all based on Avi.
Okay. All right.
As a prerequisite. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah. And then it utilizes also the CSI, the storage in container storage interface, uses shared named independent disks for VCD to create persistent storage whenever needed for your Tanzu clusters. Yeah. And then it's a Tanzu product stack, the workload cluster, the TKG, as I said. TKGS is available, but not through CSE. So TKGS is already integrated if your provider VDC, which is basically vCenter, have the workload management enabled, then you can just roll out or use TKGS clusters. So CSE 4.0 is mainly TKG. And as I said, it's not the next version of CSE 3.x. It's totally a whole new way of providing container services on VCD. So it's OVA based, Photon S. You don't need to do any package installments, or you don't do any special CLI commands. You just roll out the OVA as a VApp, and that's it. And then you have to install then on your portal, on your Cloud Director portal, a Kubernetes cluster plugin, which you also can download from the same page of the CSE OVA from the Customer Connect, from VMware Customer Connect. You just need to upload this plugin in your provider portal. Then you'll have access to special new tab called CSE Management. This is where you manage actually or interact with your CSE server component. Previously, that was your CSE CLI that you had to install and then to interact and configure your server with. With CSE 4.0, no CLI, it's just a new tab, GUI, much easier to interact and deal with your CSE server.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's completely stateless. You can perform backups and restores by VCD. It's really backed and integrated with VCD. So the workflow for the provider is much more easier. So yeah, there is no apart workflow that you need to follow to manage the CSE 4.0 components. So yeah, some features again. You can offer multi-control plane TKG clusters. So when you roll out your TKG clusters, you can choose 3 control plane nodes, for example. So you have like redundant control plane, and it utilizes the CAP-VCD as we talked about, and the NSXT advanced load balancer for providing layer 4 services. You can have a CSE 4.0 server high availability clusters. So this is also supported. So yeah, and from the same interface. Basically, in your tenants, you can perform lifecycle management for your TKG clusters. So if there is a new version or new update available, the provider can publish that to the tenants, and then tenants from the same interface, these can just update their TKG clusters.
Okay.
So the CPI. So yeah, as I was telling you, I don't think that you will be able to use actually N6V, because as I told you, the architecture and how it's built, it's already uses for the CPI for the interface. It looks almost for an integrated AVI.
Right. Yeah.
To provision the ingress services, and uses the CSI, as you said, for the shared independent disk for the persistent volumes. And it leverages our TKG ecosystem, so it's all VMware Tanzu verified core packages which are running when you deploy.
I suppose if you wanted to, in this case, then if you're using an NSX Advanced Load Balancer today, then all the licensing is done by the VCD abstraction of standard versus, I think it's premium or something like that, right?
Correct. It's a standard premium, but Cloud Director doesn't really check. So when the Cloud Director, when you add the load balancer capability to your edges, it will tell you, okay, you need to choose what feature set or what feature level you want. Is it standard or premium? But it doesn't really verify what you really have on the AVI side.
Yeah, the AVI, I think, is always enterprise, right? So
correct.
In order to kind of minimize the cost of everything being enterprise license. But then could you start looking at things like, container ingress, firewalling, and additional value-added services that you could deploy using AVI in this situation?
Well, yeah, of course, because this part is more of an AKO. So once you deploy your Tanzu clusters, Cloud Director is, I'm done.
Yeah.
So So the next step will be if you want to achieve the layer 7 or layer 7, sorry, advanced capabilities, for example, like Ingress, or this specific functionality from Avi, this will be done by AKO. Then it's a matter of deploying on the Tanzu cluster from the tenant side, rolling out AKO, and just see how you can start offer such services. But it's not really binded to the Cloud Director.
No. Yeah, no worries. It's a kind of level down, isn't it? Yeah.
Correct. Yes, correct. Because Avi is still as a kind of an independent, not kind of, it's really still independent, product.
Yeah.
So the architecture in an overview, if you look how the CSE 4, and this is here, doesn't really, the difference is not really that much between 3.0 and 4, but the idea is the same, more or less. So you will have your tenants, and here you've got your Cloud Director with the CSE extension, and then you'll have your CSE server, which is integrated with your Cloud Director, your underlying resources, your vCenter, NSXT, and advanced load balancer, and then at the end, every tenant will be able to provision their own TKG clusters. 4, is more or less the same. So the idea is you don't have the CSE server as a Linux VM or which interacts with the Cloud Director. You'll create an org, basically with an org VDC, where you roll out the CSE 4.0 OVA in it as a VApp, and you just you install the CSE extension plugin on your Cloud Director, and then the integration is done for you. And then when you need to manage anything in the CSE 4, like updating your CSE server, changing particular API interfaces, whatever, you do it from the user interface plugin that you already integrate within the Cloud Director. So you don't need to touch any command line. The only thing that also have it in the lab here that you may need to access the CLI of the CSE VApp is to check for example, some logs while cluster creation. If your tenant cluster creation fails, there's a file here called CSE.log, and this is where actually all the workflow is logged. So you can just look, to troubleshoot, but it's not really to configure any special values. And the same for the tenant. From tenant perspective, it's exactly the same. So for the tenant doesn't really matter. It's mainly for the provider workflow that the life of the provider is much easier. Okay. So looking a bit in depth into the details or the architecture of the lab setup. So or in general. So this is how it looks like, the integration of VCD. And with CSE 4.0. So here what you have is you've got an edge cluster. In my lab it's called Tosti. And then here you've got and then you've got a provider. Basically here a tier 0, which I'm using VRFs. So basically here in my lab setup, I have my Cloud Director using a VRF called Provider Gateway 01. And then for the Avi part, which is the most interesting part, you'll have to have an Avi dedicated tier 1 router, where you actually have here your service engines. So they will have you'll create a logical segment for your Avi service engine management interfaces. And then this one here, which is the data interface logical segment, this is actually would be created automatically once you enable Avi or load balancing on the edge of your tenant, for example. Okay.
Yeah, so VCD does that in the background.
Exactly. So you don't touch actually, and this VCD will create them, and they will have a prefix. If you check your NSXT instance, they will have a prefix of VCD-load balancer and then a unique identifier. So you don't actually manually create. And this is one of the differences here with the whole workflow. You don't create the Avi data service engines or data interfaces in that integration. So from the preparation from the provider side, you need to have Avi deployed, of course. And then NSX, you'll dedicate tier 1. Tier 1, you'll define a management segment for you, which will be used for your Avi deployment. And then you'll just have to make sure that the routing is fine. So from here, you'll have to make sure that the Avi SE management segment can reach your Avi controllers, which in my case, it's somewhere in the external network here. It's not shown. So you'll have to make sure that your routing is properly configured. So this is what you need to do. From the CSE perspective, so from CSE, you will create an org for the CSE. You prepare it just as a normal tenant. You'll have to have an edge. and then you roll out the CSE virtual appliance. This is just a routed network, which is an internal tenant network, which I created. Important here on this edge that it will have a net rule, basically, and this is the external network. So just from netting to one of these subnets, because CSE appliance needs access to the Cloud Director interface. That's it. There is no need for internet access, but needs to be able to access the Cloud Director interface. So you'll have to make sure also that your netting, your routing are in place.
Okay.
For the tenant org here, the workflow is just very simple. Again, you'll just have to have an edge, and then also an internal routed network, and that's the subnet which I'm using, and this is where actually the Tanzu nodes will be connected to. On the tenant org, you'll have to have netting properly configured, and the Tanzu nodes requires access to the Cloud Director interface and the internet. This is where they push, or they actually pull the packages from.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you need access to the Cloud Director? Because the idea of the workflow, how we provision or CSE provision clusters for tenants, it rolls out or creates first an ephemeral VM, where this ephemeral VM basically runs a kind cluster. So it's very lightweight Kubernetes cluster kind. And then from this, the kind cluster will start provisioning. It will be connected to the same segment, and it will start pushing and downloading packages needed, and then will start rolling out.
Okay, so it's like a boot cluster,
yeah, exactly, like a bootstrap.
Yeah.
So it will roll out the nodes, and once the work is done, the ephemeral VM will be deleted automatically as part of the workflow. So this here, this org network, you have to make sure that you have proper internet connectivity and Cloud Director connectivity on your edge.
So Bassem, just quickly, the load balancers themselves, do you get to specify the VIP address for external traffic, or is that
no, the VEP will be actually taken from the external pool here.
Right. Okay.
So it will get an IP from, and this is a good question, it will take an IP from the available pool that you define for your edge.
Okay.
And this subnet here, this is automatically created for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you enable the load balancing service on that edge, and it will create this link for you automatically, basically. So it will hook up your edge here to the same one as on your service engine.
Okay.
And then and then as a next step here, one of the things, you can also change this subnet if you want, but it's not really routed anyway. So, but if you need, you can change it. If you need to route the subnet, change it. One of the things that I wanted to highlight here is the load balancing service. Yeah, you can also specify the service engine group that you want to use.
I was just about to ask that. Yeah, so you can specify that. Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So you can have it also either dedicated or shared.
Yeah.
So you can either have your service engine shared across different tenants, or per tenant. If you have them dedicated, so that's fine. If you have them shared, so in the service engine they have, I believe, 10 network interfaces, I believe. So or data interfaces, so they can serve a maximum 10 tenants.
Yeah.
So this is one of these scaling factors that you have to keep in mind.
I was going to say, because that service layer will probably change quite a bit over the course of time as you put more tenants onto the onto the CSE and start creating more clusters. Yeah,
that's right. Okay, so this is in a nutshell the architecture. For the rest here, the only thing is just some rules that you might have. So again, provider admin, a tenant admin. So eventually, if you want to have your tenants being able to create the Tanzu clusters, they need to have a specific users with specific roles to be able to deploy those clusters. And for the TKG clusters, your users needs to have a role which supports or enables or allows CAP VCD cluster creation. So this is the difference, because for TKGS it's different roles. For TKG it's called the CAP VCD. to roll out the KFCD clusters.
Yeah.
So that was the more or less. So the networking here, it's again just the N60 and advanced load balancer.
Yeah, you raise a good point again, just to kind of validate this. So there is no TKGS anymore. There is just the Tanzu Kubernetes grid. Some people call it 2.0, but it's basically TKGM, right?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. And we support at the moment, or CSE supports at the moment, only Ubuntu templates. So you cannot import Photon OS templates from TKG. So it's only Ubuntu. So you have to make sure that when you share or you upload the TKG templates for your tenants, that they are Ubuntu based and not Photon OS based.
Okay, is there any reason for that?
To be honest, I don't know. And it was also, I was somehow surprised.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised about that.
Yeah, but it's So I don't know what's the reason, but I believe it's still because I'm not sure. I don't know the internals, but for example, CSE 3.x also I believe it's only also Ubuntu, not Photon OS based.
All right, well, good to know.
Yeah. Otherwise, they will not appear for the tenant. In the workflow, when the tenant will need to roll the cluster, they will not see. If you use Photon OS, they will not appear as an option.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this basically here, concludes the slide deck that I have. I think it's good if we look into the workflow a bit. So here, basically, the first step will be actually what I'm doing is I am uploading the user interface plugin, which actually will allow me to configure or interact with the CSE server. So again, and this you just can download from the same page on the Customer Connect where you get the CSE server OVA from.
Okay.
So just make sure that you publish this so your tenants can also use it. So and then you will need to log in, log out of the user interface just to refresh.
To get the plugin to
exactly. Exactly. And once you're done, this is the first step. The second step will be actually creating your catalog and upload the OVAs. And a step before that is what I did was I created an org called CSE, and it actually have an org VDC, which is also called CSE server. And I prepared. Let's just quickly look into it. You'll see that for the CSE org, I have an edge that's configured. So if I go to networking, I have network called CSE network, which is basically this subnet where I'll be connecting the CSE server OVA to. I have an edge gateway here, which is configured with basically 2 NAT rules. So a source NAT, so actually to allow your CSE server to be able to reach Cloud Director, and a destination NAT, and this is just to allow me from my jump box to access the CSE server, so I can check the logs and so on. And then I have an org VDC, which is here, the CSE server, and then actually what I also created that was 2 catalogs. CSE catalog, this is where I have uploaded the OVA that I was downloaded from the Customer Connect. This is the CSE server OVA, and this is the step that tells you that you have to do. And another catalog, and this doesn't need to be shared. What needs to be shared with the other tenants is actually the TKG or TKG templates. And this is where actually I have here my Ubuntu image uploaded, and this is shared with my tenants.
Okay.
So this is from the CSE perspective. How you start then is simply you need to go here, and from your catalogs, for example, you go for CSE, and then from the VApp templates, this one here, and you say just need to create a VApp from this template. You'll go through a workflow of deploying the VApp. And before you actually go to the deployment of the VApp, there is one actual step that here I wanted to show you. If we go back here, and then you go to Kubernetes, CSE management. So once you create the catalogs and the org VDCs, upload the OVAs, before you actually deploy it, you will need to click on Start here. And this is special workflow that actually CSE will start register itself, or the plugin with the Cloud Director, prepared to be able to create the CAP VCD RDEs, create a special CSE admin role that you'll actually need to be used, or that's actually where you need to create a user, assign the user this actually admin role, and this user needs to be created actually, and while you deploy the VApp template, you'll have to use that user, because that user will be used by the CSE server to interface with the Cloud Director.
Oh, okay, that's a
And
good
this,
point.
yeah,
So
and this is all.
Don't get carried away and just start deploying the VApp.
Yeah, sorry. So this is actually, you need to do actually this step. This is also very important here, that it creates the VM sizing policies. So basically to create for you a list of available VM sizes, which will be used as a size or t-shirt sizes for your Tanzu nodes. So you'll have TKG small, X large, large, and so on. So, and then next, you'll set some configuration parameters here for the CSE. These are the defaults, by the way. So I did not change anything. These are the defaults that you get from that. And once this is created, what you need to do is you need then to create a user. So what I did is I created a user here called CSE-service, and this user is assigned the CSE admin role, which is actually the one that the CSE server has created for us. And then once this is done, you go here, you say create a VApp from this template. So you need to accept the individual license agreement. So let me just quickly CSE. I'll not create it, I want to show you where you actually.
I was going to say, because you're not logged in as a CSE server user account, are you?
No, yeah, because you don't need to be logged in. You need one time just to log in with the CSE service account to be able to generate a token, an API token.
Yeah. Oh, it is a service. It is
yes, it's a service account.
Okay,
yes.
got it. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So you need one time to log into that user, and then you go to preferences, generate an API token, and that's it.
Okay.
So just gonna show you very quickly where actually this needs to be configured. So this is all defaults. Nothing here special. VApp networking. I'll just leave it for now. Yeah, here's where it's very important, and this is where also some confusion happens. So from here, you'll have to define the fully qualified domain name or the IP address of your Cloud Director. Here, actually, this is where you actually need to type in your service account, and here you need to paste your API token. The system for the service account must always be system. The accounts org will have always to stay as a system. And for the VApp org, this is actually the name of the VApp to which we are deploying, the VApp, or the org actually to which we are deploying the CSE, which in my case is called, actually, if you go back and you check resources, so it's called CSE. Sorry, just quickly. Yeah, VApp org. So you just here, you have to specify CSE. And that's it. So this will roll out the CSE server for you. Once it's done, you see here that it's a VApp, and it's got a VM which is running. The VM, it's connected to the NIC of the VM is connected here to this one. Which is the subnet, which has a NAT configuration. So this is, let me share another screen with you. So this is basically here. This is a CSE server, and I'm viewing just the logs. So this is where you can actually see, it's just the root. And if you just do a tail on a file called CSE.log, this is where actually all the CSE server logging is happening.
And if you got, I saw there was a syslog set up as well in a CSE configuration. So you just send all this to syslog, right?
That's right. That's right. So so going back, so this is here, this concludes the provider workflow, setting up the CSE server, the application, and this is all done. Now, if you go back now for your tenants, so this here, a list of my orgs that I have. So for example, if I pick this one, So these are my VDCs. Let me just open quickly one of these tenants here. Oh, and before that, so for that particular tenant or for the list of tenants, what you last step that you need to do is you need to publish. So if you go to administration and you go for rights bundles, you'll have to make sure that this one here is published for the tenants.
Okay.
For your tenants. This is to be able for them to create CAB VCD clusters.
Okay.
One of the other things that you still need to do, also prepare before your tenant can actually create them, is what I did is I created, I cloned an org admin role, to be able to create VApps and so on, because this is needed. And I just called it org admin with TKG. It will take some time to load. But under others, or under roles, others, you'll find the specific role or permission which allows CAB VCD cluster creation.
Okay.
This you'll have to choose, and then you have to publish this role. And then when under the organization, under your org or your tenant portal, so this one, this is here. I created a user called NSX Bash and assigned that user the published role.
Yeah.
Because you'll not be creating cluster using administrator or admin credentials or for your portal, not in the tenant. So this is a tenant user with the TKG or CAB VCD permissions.
Right.
So so what you need to do after that is actually going here as a tenant. This is a tenant view. So this is my data center. And then you go here, Kubernetes container clusters. And see here, there's a list of already previously created TKG clusters, and you can see the version that's of them running, and so on, and the owner who created them. So at the moment, if you want to create a new one,
sorry, just going back to that,
sure.
Cloning that user account, is that like just a best practice that you would do, not give the users the actual user rights from the kind of the real account, if you like?
No, I got your point. So for me, it was just kind of assumed that the org admin will be also the one that creates clusters, but that's not always true, of course. So you can also selectively choose a user, which will be maybe your developers or a developer, and you assign the user particular creation. So you'll have to make sure that the user can create CAB VCD, can create VApps, because when you roll out a TKG cluster, the system will create a VApp for you. So you need to be able to create a VApp. Also from the vCenter perspective, the VApps will be sort of a VM. So there's also some resource pools also will be created. So you have to make sure that all things are fine for that user. If you don't want to use the org admin, of course.
Okay. All right, I see. So basically this gets around you using an org admin account by just cloning those
exactly
rights.
Yes. Okay. And then add on top of that the CAB VCD permissions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is here the clusters. One of the things that I want to show you before we show you how to create a cluster is actually the edge configuration here for the tenant, because for the CSE obviously you don't need to have any load balancers created. It's only for the tenant edges. So if you go here for the tenant edge under load balancer, you see it's active, and you see this is here the subnet that I was telling you about. That's the special service subnet, which is actually used as the subnet for the service engine data interfaces.
Right.
And this is a service engine group called TKG SA group, for example, which I specifically created and for my tenants or for my TKG nodes in that tenant. See here, virtual service, it consumes 3 out of 100 IPs, and this is basically if you look into the virtual services, these actually the IPs that were actually taken from the external network that are assigned to that edge. So the 192.16.110, if you go to the IP allocation, is 192.16.110.
Yeah.
So I have a pool of 100 IPs, and this is where actually also the AVI will be spinning up virtual services IPs or assigning virtual service IPs from. Then you actually go here, and then there's pretty straightforward. You just click on new, If you as a provider, you are offering multiple flavors, they will also appear here. So if I enable TKGS, which is enabled but not for that tenant, you will see the option, or give the option for your tenant to choose either to go for a TKG or TKGS, for example. Or if you have a CSE 3.x, like in a coexistence model, as I said, you'll see also here the option if you want to have native Kubernetes clusters deployed. So if you pick this one, then just a name. And then you see here appearing, and this is pulled from the shared catalog that I showed you previously. You choose the image, then you choose which data center you want to roll out in, and this is just an org network which I configured from the reference architecture. Make sure that's also netted on your edge and it has internet and VCD connectivity. You specify the number of control plane nodes, the sizing policies, which I told you about, that they have also to be published. And I'll show you quickly how. Storage profile, if you have, this is pulled from the vCenter, by the way. So this is already in my vCenter. I have a storage profile called Kubernetes storage.
Okay.
Then here, your worker nodes, you can also specify them or leave defaults.
And the activate GPU, is that new in 4.0?
Yeah.
It is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's if you want to roll out nodes with vGPU.
Yeah, so that'd be NVIDIA vGPU is the only support today.
Correct.
That's quite nice actually, because we didn't have that before. That was you were having to do Kubernetes containers on a VM, and then the VM would be separately, the GPU would be provisioned for that VM. So this is actually really nice because this is Tanzu native on direct on GPU. Yeah.
Correct, and it's just one checkbox or a slide bar that you need to choose.
Yeah.
And then moving further, just selecting storage here. Next, the network, just there's your CIDRs for services and pods. This is here interesting. Just one note: the auto repair feature, if you have it on, if there is any issue that's encountered while the TKG cluster is being deployed, it will try to auto recover from the issue by actually deleting the whole thing and starting again.
Okay.
So if you want to troubleshoot, you have to turn it off.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the ephemeral VM and all the logging will be deleted.
Yeah.
If so this is important. If there's an issue and you want to troubleshoot, make sure that it's turned off.
Okay.
And then you just review here, and it's just the warning because I'm creating as an admin, so just can ignore because I'm logged in as administrator, not as the NSX pass. And that's it. And then you click on finish, and it will start rolling out the whole cluster for you. It will just start the workflow. What I wanted just to show you as a last thing, and see here it says creating CAP VCD cluster.
And I presume now you can sort of tail the log file in the
exactly.
In the CSE server.
Exactly. Yeah. So but before I show you the tail, I just want to show you something quickly here, because this is important. Make sure that before you can actually, before the user can choose from the t-shirt sizes, that you actually are on your, like, if you pick this one, for example, if you go to the VM sizing, you see here, these t-shirt sizes are actually added by the CSE server. So if you click on add, because they already added. Let me show you another provider.
So the install would fail if that wasn't the case.
Sorry?
Would the install fail if they hadn't been added?
Yeah, you cannot choose. There will not be default, but it will take the default from the CSE manager. So I'll show you this in a second. Okay. So this is just an org, which the CSE, which doesn't have any Tanzu. So if I go to VM sizing, if you click add, then you'll have to add them from here. Yeah. So to your question, if we don't define the t-shirt sizes, so if you go here, if you go to the Kubernetes, CSE management, here there is actually,
I was going to say it's by default, isn't it?
There is a default, yes, which is this one here.
Yeah. Okay.
So it rolled out as a small. This is So make sure that you that you offer the right t-shirt sizes. Again, depends on the service level of your tenant, of course, because maybe for just some tenants you are only offering small nodes.
Yeah.
Medium or X large. So here you can see it's in the creation process for our cluster. Again, it should be actually, if I look into vCenter, you should see the ephemeral VM created. So here's this one here. It's still in the cloning phase. So it's creating the ephemeral VM from the same actually image as the nodes. And once this VM is created or deployed, you will have powered up. We'll start creating the kind cluster and then bootstrapping the rest of the Tanzu nodes. Advanced logging and troubleshooting will all be done in that VM.
And just thinking out loud, if service providers provisioning a number of different customers at the same time, would you see multiple ephemeral VMs being launched? And there's
very
no
good point. Yes, very good point. And there was some discussions. I show that yes, in a large providers, of course, this is a lab environment, so this is nothing. But in a provider environment where if you've got multiple tenants and even tenants which are kind of developers spinning up, deleting, spinning up tons, of course, this will be a massive traffic. And if you have a specific software or a logging or monitoring technique to monitor VMs creation, deletion, of course, this will generate quite interesting events.
Okay, but it can handle multiple provisionings.
Yeah, of course. Multiple clusters, no problem.
Right. So I guess there's there's quite a few steps here still. I mean, the nice thing is there's no kind of API, CLI necessary anymore for setting this up, but there is quite a few kind of configurations in the process that you've got to absolutely manage.
Yes.
Is there support for automation of this? With like Terraform or something like that?
I've personally never tried. But I mean, with your Terraform and Cloud Director, I don't see why not. But there is no kind of, at the moment, as far as I know, specific technical guidance from our side on how to use or to automate the whole thing using Terraform. But it should not be different than what we usually do with Terraform and Cloud Director.
Yeah, I think Terraform, just looking here, so Terraform supported 3.1 all the way up to 3.7. So I guess the next version of Terraform will have full support for CSE 4.0. Yeah. Because I can imagine this would be, it's fine doing it one-on-one like you're doing it at the moment, but when you're doing it in massive environments, you're going to need to automate it and so you don't have any mistakes at all. Yeah.
Of course.
Awesome, but Sam, that was fantastic. Oh, that was really good, actually, because I actually had you answer a lot of key questions for me around how this actually works. So it's nice to see the difference there, and I'm sure our providers are going to very much appreciate less CLI.
Yeah, and, I did appreciate much less CLI.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think at the moment, until the Terraform thing's there, it's something that you absolutely can roll out. But it's not something that you necessarily want to roll out at scale at this particular time, just because of the operational process and making sure all those things are done in the way they need to be done.
Yeah, that's right.
But Sam, thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.